Lou Costello and his co-star Bud Abbott put on some of the best comedic shows ever. Behind the scenes, though, his life was full of ups and downs and tragedies. Lou Costello left a big mark on the entertainment business, from the height of his work to the sad end that made many people feel bad. Do you know everything about his work and life, though? Follow this path. The early years of Lou Costello. Lou Costello was born on March 6, 1906, in Paterson, New Jersey. His real name is Louis Francis Castillo, and he was born to Italian refugees. Stefano Castillo and Rose Castillo were his working-class parents. They worked in textile shops and other businesses in the area. Lou was the seventh child and the youngest. The financial problems his family was having reduced his chances to advance in his career. However, these hard times had a big impact on Lou Costello's personality and job path. Costello became interested in the arts and entertainment while he was in high school. He took part in school plays and other cultural events that helped him improve his acting skills and sense of what the audience wanted. Costello had to find a way to make money very quickly, though, because things were hard for his family. After finishing high school, he couldn't go to college like many of his friends did. Instead, he had to work hard to support himself. He did everything from driving and waiting tables to working as a salesman in shops to make sure he and his family could afford to live. Costello did not give up on his big dream, though, which was to become an artist. These short-term jobs were just a way for him to get involved in artistic activities, like vaudeville shows, which were a type of performance art that mixed music, comedy, dance, and other special acts. Here, Lou Costello slowly got better at playing and using his natural sense of humor, building a unique brand of comedy that would help him stand out in the entertainment business. During this time, Lou Costello stopped going by his real name, Louis Castella, and started going by the stage name Lou Costello. This change not only helped people recognize him, but it also marked a turning point in his work as an artist. Even though his first few years in the entertainment business weren't easy, they set him up for later big wins. After meeting and working with Bud Abbott in the 1930s, Costello's career took a new turn. Abbott, who was serious and sharp in his comedy, was a great fit for Costello, who was innocent and funny on stage. Together, they were a great comedy team and became comedy icons. Abbott and Costello did many comedy shows together in theaters, on the radio, and in movies, solidifying their names in the entertainment business. Costello did not have an easy time with everything, though. In the beginning of their work together, both had a lot of trouble creating a style that was their own. Abbott and Costello had to deal with competition from other comedies that people liked. By constantly trying new things, though, they were able to create a unique style of entertainment that a lot of people liked. It was one of Costello's biggest achievements that he kept getting better in movies. He and Abbott were in hit comedies like Buck Privates, 1941, In the Navy, 1941, and Hold That Ghost, 1941. In addition to being big hits at the box office, these movies changed the way comedies were made in the 1940s. Costello did more than just work in shows and movies, though. He also appeared on a lot of TV shows, worked in a lot of different fields, and did a lot of important things that added to his reputation. These wins not only showed how much Costello had grown, but also how persistent and creative he was in the entertainment business, even though he had a hard time getting started. Lou Costello's early career, from temporary jobs to becoming a big star in Hollywood, shows how determined and talented he was to follow his dreams and keep working to get ahead in the tough entertainment business. Lou Costello and Bud Abbott meeting and working together is one of the strangest coincidences in the history of comedy. They went on to become the famous comic duo Abbott and Costello. Before they met, they were both working in the entertainment business in different ways. But it was this meeting that brought them together in a way that made them very successful in the 1940s and 1950s. The chance to meet Bud Abbott. They met for the first time at a New York bar in the late 1930s. Abbott had worked in the theater business before he met Costello, mostly in comedy and vaudeville shows. Because he was so serious and sharp in his comedy, Abbott made a name for himself as a narrator or straight man in comic shows. Costello, on the other hand, was a comedian who had a silly and sometimes awkward attitude and loved making people laugh with his mistakes. At first, Costello did vaudeville shows by himself, but as soon as he met Abbott, they felt like their styles of acting fit together perfectly. The straightforward, sensible Abbott and the clumsy, silly Costello seemed to be the exact opposites of each other in terms of their humor, but was very well matched. After a few tryouts, Abbott and Costello agreed to work together for real, and they started to appear in movies and TV shows together. The first time Abbott and Costello worked together was when they were both performing in bars. Their comedy routines were based on how different their roles were from each other. He always tried to be the cool guy and teach others, while Costello played the silly guy who always messed up and didn't get easy things. One of their first shows was Who's on First, which is now one of their most popular and well-known comedy routines. Price asks Abbott for the names of the baseball players in Who's on First, but the names can be both questions and answers. So who's on first? What's second? It leads to a funny situation that can't be stopped. This routine is thought to be one of the best comedic acts ever, and has come to represent how well Abbott and Costello got along. These two quickly became one of the most popular comedy teams in American theater, especially in the 1940s and 1950s. They were huge hits because Costello's mistake humor and Abbott's cool, calm personality went so well together that people couldn't take their eyes off of them. Many people know them from their radio show The Abbott and Costello Show. Abbott and Costello had a big, loyal fan base when their show ran on ABC from 1942 to 1949. They were an important part of the culture of the time because of how well they got along in radio comedies. Aside from being popular on the radio, Abbott and Costello were also very popular in movies. The movie Buck Privates, which came out in 1941, was one of their first projects and was a big hit. Following this success, they participated in many other famous films such as Who's. These films were all commercial successes and helped Abbott and Costello solidify their place as big stars of Hollywood at that time. Their unique style of comedy was one of the things that made Abbott and Costello so popular. Being the silly character, Costello always messed things up and made funny mistakes, while Abbott, being cool and sensible, was the straight man who tried to keep things in order. When a clumsy entertainer and a serious person worked together, they made a funny show that people couldn't stop watching. Abbott also helped keep the balance in Costello's comedy by making changes and changing things. The lead role played by Abbott was very important in many of Abbott and Costello's most famous comedies, like Who's on First or The Foreign Legion. The two actors had to work together very well, with Abbott often explaining or controlling things to keep the audience guessing. They were comedy stars because they had great chemistry together and a unique way of making people laugh. In the 1950s and 1940s, the pair was successful on radio and in movies, and they also had a big impact on comics who came after them. They left a great mark on the entertainment business with comedy shows that people still love today. Golden Age and Big Steps Forward. Bud Abbott and Lou Costello have been together for a long time and are one of the most famous comedy teams in Hollywood history. From the 1940s to the 1950s, they were in a lot of popular movies, mostly war comedies and Universal Pictures movies. Not only did the two make people laugh, but they also made movies that changed the humor scene in Hollywood. The 1941 movie Buck Privates was one of Costello's most famous works. People loved and paid a lot of money for this war comedy in which Costello and Abbott played men in the army. The movie helped Abbott and Costello become famous and set the stage for later movies like the 1941 horror comedy Hold the Ghost. On IMDb, you can find out more about Abbott and Costello's well-known movies. In addition to movies, Abbott and Costello were well known on TV. From 1952 to 1954, the team was on the famous TV show The Abbott and Costello Show, where they played funny and unique characters. People who saw this show felt strongly about it, and many still love it today. The entertainment business, especially comedy, has changed a lot because of Lou Costello's work. In the 1940s and 1950s, Abbott and Costello changed the comedy business. They paved the way for other artists and inspired many generations of entertainers. Costello had a big impact on the entertainment business, even though they didn't win many important awards. Much of what he did helped bring comedy to the big and small screens, making a big impact on the growth of the genre. With Abbott and Costello's comedies, they helped raise the standing of light entertainment that everyone can enjoy. Lou Costello's fall from fame. After his peak and huge popularity, Lou Costello had a lot of money and job problems. It was at its best in the 1940s and early 1950s for Costello, but after that, things started to go downhill. People weren't as interested in his movies and TV shows as they used to be. Along with the rise of TV and more competition, people's tastes in entertainment had changed, which was one reason. Costello's business took a hit because he couldn't keep up with his old partners. The Abbott and Costello show ended in 1954 after it had been on TV. It wasn't working out as well for Costello as it used to. Things didn't go well with the jobs he worked on after that, and he started having money problems. Because of this, he had to look for work outside of show business to support himself. He got into legal trouble because his debts kept growing and his finances were getting worse. Around the end of his life, Lou Costello's health got worse and worse, which hurt not only his work but also his personal and mental health. He couldn't keep working on the big projects he had started before because he was overweight, had heart disease, and had other health problems. It was too hard for Costello to keep up the busy work routine he was used to because of his health. In his later years, Costello had long-term health problems. The biggest ones were obesity and heart disease. There had been problems with these things for a long time, but they got worse as his work went on. Being overweight makes you more likely to get heart disease and other heart-related health problems. An important heart attack Costello had in 1959, just a few weeks before he died, made his health worse. Costello was hit hard by the heart attack, which hurt his health and made it hard for him to work. He got better, but he wasn't the same physically anymore, which made him feel even more tired from work. From that point on, he had to cut down on his public outings and movie and comedy roles. Costello's bad health also made it hard for him to do live shows, which were his strong suit in the early years of his work. Costello's health was getting worse, and he was also having money problems. He had trouble making ends meet in his later years, especially after the entertainment business changed and he lost his old position. Costello was under a lot of financial stress because he didn't have any big projects or steady income. At the same time, things were also bad in his home life. After getting married to Ann Battler in 1934 and having 3 kids, he had trouble with his marriage in his later years. Costello had problems with his relationships and with his family. His life was all over the place because of these mental problems. He also had problems with being alone and mental stress. Costello slowly faded from public view as his health, money, and family issues got worse. People used to love his happy, energetic, and funny appearance, but it wasn't there as much in his later years. He used to be known for being sad, but over time, worry and stress took the place of the happiness and fun he used to bring to audiences. These things not only hurt Costello's career, but they also made him less popular with the people. Fans noticed a big change in his style and personality as his health and personal problems took over. His comedic work became even less relevant, and he slowly lost his place in the entertainment business, which he had dedicated his life to. Lou Costello's decline in both his business and his health put an end to an iconic American entertainment show. He left behind a tragic story of loss and personal crisis for a famous artist. Painful loss. Lou Costello also lost important people in his life, which made him feel even more hopeless and lost in his later years. When his daughter Lou Ann Costello died in 1943, it was one of the worst things that could have happened to him. Lou Ann had a stroke and died when she was 29 years old. Costello was deeply saddened by the loss, which hurt him deeply. And Lou Ann's death was unbearable pain. Costello felt even more lost because he thought that the people around him did not understand his pain. Even though he was famous and loved by many, Costello felt alone in his own life. Costello felt even worse after the death of his daughter because the people around him didn't understand or were thankful. Family relationships didn't get better, and Costello didn't seem to get enough comfort or support from his loved ones. Costello felt more and more lost in that situation. Not only did his job go downhill, but he also lost important people in his personal life. He was getting more and more unhappy because he was frustrated and didn't know what to do. He also started to spend less time with his family and friends and do fewer social things. He was lonely and sad in the last few years of his life because he had lost his daughter. These problems in his personal life and his deep loneliness had a big effect on Lou Costello's mind and spirit. He tried to keep up a funny and upbeat public image throughout his career, but deep down, he couldn't hide his sadness and sense of being lost, death, and the public's reaction to him. Lou Costello died of a sudden stroke on March 3, 1959. He was 52 years old. People in the comedy world and comedy fans all over the world were shocked when he died. Costello was a huge star in comedy and a friend. He was best known as half of the comedy team Abbott and Costello. A father figure and a well-liked public person. Everyone was shocked when Costello died, even though his last years were full of health troubles and personal loss. No one could have thought that someone who had spent their whole life making people laugh would die so quickly. Costello died at his home in Beverly Hills, and radio stations first told everyone about it. People were sad, impressed, and thankful when they heard about Costello's death. Abbott and Costello were two of the most famous performers in American history, especially in the 1940s and 1950s. Some of their best-known songs were with Buck Privates, who was on Costello's first and most listened-to radio shows. Fans of Costello from all over the world sent their deepest sympathies. Friends and co-workers in the entertainment business also shared their sadness. But Abbott, who had worked with Costello for a long time, got very sad when he heard that his close friend had died. Even though they had had problems in the past, Abbott was still sad about Costello's death. To his family. At the time, Costello lived with his wife and kids. His family and friends were shocked when he died, even though he didn't have much time to spend with them. Even though Costello had a hard time with his job in his later years, his comedy work was still praised and respected. How Lou Costello left his mark, and what he did. There is no denying Lou Costello's impact on comedy, especially for his famous work with Bud Abbott as part of the famous comedy team Abbott and Costello. These two artists not only changed how comedy was done on stage and screen, but they also had a big effect on comedy in general. Simple jokes that worked really well were created by Abbott and Costello. For example, the famous line, "Who's on first?" putting them in the history of American comedy. The two comedians had their own unique style. Costello always played the fuck guy, and Abbott was always the straight guy. This made for some very funny and clever situations. These two together set the standard for many comedic pairs that came after, in movies and TV shows. Their comedy wasn't just jokes. It also showed how creative and changing American society was at the time. People still think of Abbott and Costello as the founders of situation comedy and dialogue comedy, so their impact lives on. Costello's clever ways of making people laugh, especially in his skits and radio shows, were used by many comics after him. Lou Costello left a legacy that lives on today. A big impact on generations of comics. People like Johnny Carson, David Letterman, Jerry Seinfeld, and Ellen DeGeneres have been inspired by Costello's creative and unique way of making people laugh. These artists often make funny situations out of ideas that Abbott and Costello first explored, like semantic conflicts or silly situations. Many people remember Lou Costello, not just entertainers, but also through memorials and memorials. Items and papers about his life and work, such as tapes of his TV and radio shows, have been kept safe by museums and art institutions. Costello and Abbott are often used as examples for other comedians by people who study the history of entertainment. The Lou Costello Memorial Awards are also given out every year to honor and remember his contributions to comedy. In many places, events like rescreenings of Abbott and Costello movies are also held, which draws people who love the duo's work. People still remember Lou Costello through comedies on TV and in movies today. Privates and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein are still shown on TV, and they not only entertain viewers, but also serve as an inspiration to filmmakers and comedians of today. Costello's late-night comedy shows also started a new era of comedy programming, and his influence can still be seen in modern shows like Saturday Night Live and late-night talk shows. Costello and Abbott made it possible for comedians today to freely experiment and improve the comedy genre. So Lou Costello wasn't just a great comic, he also started a type of comedy that has a big impact on pop culture today. Do you believe that Lou Costello's work could have gone on for longer if he hadn't had health and money issues in his later years? Please tell us what you think in the space below. Please get in touch with us. Also, don't forget to like the video and follow the station to get more cool videos. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next film.